Welcome to Frame Dropped. Maybe you're already enjoying the Spyro Reignited Trilogy, but how does the original trilogy stack up with the graphical overhaul and all other improvements? We played the original Spyro games for the PS1 and asked the question, are the games still as good as you remember? In order to give you an honest opinion, I held off from playing the new Reignited Trilogy, and because I've been playing too much Red Dead. Right off the bat, the original Spyro the Dragon comes from a dark and distant past called 1998. So from a time where games didn't need a deeper plot then, these dragons have been turned into stone by a spell, so go and rescue them.
Looks like I've got some things to do.
It comes from a time where complex gameplay elements aren't needed, and it's sufficient to just run and jump around and collect stuff. And it comes from a time where the main character is a purple dragon, just because that provides a better contrast to the green floor. If you can accept all that and see the game as a product of its time, Spyro the Dragon is still pretty awesome, and it's easy to get lost in its world even 20 years later. For those of you who don't know, Spyro is a typical PS1 platformer, where you have to jump and run, defeat enemies and collect stuff, such as gems and eggs, which don't serve any other purpose as to unlock more levels in which you can do the same thing all over again. And of course there are also some traditional boss fights. Maybe because of its goal to also appeal to younger players, the Spyro games are way easier than, let's say, the Crash Bandicoot games, but they can get quite challenging later on. And I think that's what does the trick. The game is very easy to learn. You have a charge attack, a fire attack and a jump button, and that's basically it. And the amount of collectibles on each map is pretty high, so you'll swoop up a majority of them without even trying, and it's not that hard to get 100%, especially in the earlier levels. So it gives you a sense of accomplishment really early on, and when it eventually gets hard, you still want to keep going. That's what she said. For a PS1 game there's actually a lot to do and to see. There's a tremendous diversity between the levels, and the games are all still pretty good examples of smart level design. Similar to Super Mario 64, the Spyro games feature some hub areas from where the actual levels are accessed via portals. And all of these levels are small semi-open worlds where there's actually more to do than just getting to the end. You sometimes learn new abilities, such as climbing in the second Spyro game, and want to go back to previously completed levels in order to maybe reach an area that was impossible to get to on your first run. Speaking of the second game, Spyro 2 Ripto's Rage, this game didn't change the formula very much, as was quite common with sequels at that time. But it improved upon Spyro 1 and added a couple of new abilities such as swimming. Hey, swimming wasn't common in gaming until GTA San Andreas, mind you. And in my opinion, the second game improved the overall collectible system. In addition to gems, you could also earn orbs for completing additional tasks in the levels. And these orbs are needed for unlocking some of the endgame levels. So again, this made you want to go back to previously played worlds and explore them even more. And unlike in the first game where enemies dropped gems the first time and afterwards dropped something that would yield you an extra life for about every 480 already defeated enemies, this time the enemies only added to a total number that was required for a different special ability depending on the level. So all in all, the second game is even better. This trend also continues with the third iteration, Spyro Year of the Dragon. This game takes everything that was good in the previous Spyro games, but adds bigger hub worlds, a total of 7 other playable characters that all have special abilities designed for their unique levels, such as Sheila the Kangaroo. Again, yes, that's what gaming was like 20 years ago. And don't forget a handful of minigames, such as skateboarding, because that's what the cool kids are doing nowadays. Spyro Year of the Dragon is still a lot of fun today, and after playing it I really wish that 3D platformers weren't so rare today. It's interesting to see these kinds of things reflect the overall quality of modern games by Insomniac. And if you'll play these games again after 20 long years, you might recognize some strands that now make out the Insomniac signature DNA, and it's nice to play these games while keeping this in mind. Visually speaking, early 3D games tend to age less well than, let's say, early 2D Nintendo titles. And the Spyro games are not a complete exception. But it's not that bad actually. The level design and level variety kind of makes up for that, and the Spyro games use a technique that uses low poly models for objects that are far away and swaps them out for more detailed models when the player gets near. This technique is commonly used today, but it was absolutely revolutionary for a franchise that started in 1998. This leads to the result that draw distance isn't heavily restricted by a fog of some kind that was often present in other PS1 games. Another thing that usually doesn't age well in PS1 games are the controls. And Spyro is definitely rougher than any modern game that can be taken seriously, but the controls honestly aged quite well. While they can be frustrating, you can also master them quite quickly, and you can even get a real sense of speed while power rushing, for example. The camera can only be turned by pressing the right or the left trigger respectively. But it makes sense if you think about it. The original PlayStation controller didn't have analog sticks, so this was basically the only way to ensure that everyone could experience the game in the same way. Sure, they could have added the additional support for the right stick, but it's a 20-year-old game for fuck's sake. You get used to it after a while. What I find interesting is that many people don't seem to remember that the camera could be controlled at all, but really you could do it. And while we're at it, the little hop that you would get at the end of a glide while pressing triangle, that has only been possible since Spyro 2. What I'm trying to say is that it's funny how you sometimes remember stuff. That's why we do this YouTube show. And I didn't think that Spyro was still almost as good as we remember it, but it is. All of the 3 original Spyro games are. I would even go as far as to say that they are probably some of the best platformers for the PS1. And there were a lot of platformers on the PS1. The thing that surprised me the most, however, was how with just good level design and momentum, a 20-year-old game can still hook me today almost as much as it originally did back then. But what do you think? Have you played the original Spyro games recently? Are you enjoying the Reignited Trilogy, or didn't it live up to your expectations? Tell us in the comments below. Also be sure to subscribe and leave a like if you don't want to miss out on our content. We make a new video every week. So until then, see you next time.